Well, over the course of the last several decades, I think especially since the Vatican Council that occurred in the mid-1960s, we've become very familiar with the word Triduum. You know, it's a word that really means 3 days. And we know that that refers liturgically to the three most sacred days that we mark as a church, beginning on Holy Thursday evening with the commemoration of the first Mass that Jesus had at the Last Supper in the upper room. The second is Good Friday, helping us remember all the steps that Jesus took to go to the hill of Calvary when he was nailed to the tree of life, the tree of the cross. And then Holy Saturday, the great Easter Vigil, the life that we celebrate with the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Well, you know, I was thinking that this week we've had a mini Triduum. You know, think about that. This past Wednesday, as we gathered together to celebrate Holy Mass, and as I invited everybody in the Church of Pittsburgh to do, we began a day of fasting and prayer against racism and against all of those bad feelings, revenge that we have in our hearts for any people. And the purpose of the day was one in which we could reflect on, you know, where do our hearts really need to be softened? You know, especially as we thought about St. Peter Claver and the great sacrifices he made for the slaves in the 16th century. And we were inspired that day because we heard the Sermon on the Plain in Father Tom's beautiful homily. And then yesterday when we gathered together, we celebrated a Mass. Father Steve celebrated the Mass, and it was for our oppressors. You know, all of those people who wish nothing but the worst for us. And we had a chance to be able to reflect on, you know, on the beautiful gospel and Father Steve's beautiful homily about how we need to be ever so generous of digging down into our hearts and how we reach out to other people. And today we now come to this third day, a very sad and tragic anniversary for not only us in the United States, but for all the citizens of the world as we remember what happened on September 11th, 2001, 19 years ago. And the heart of it all, the heart of what we need to be able to take a look at as we reflect on these last 3 days of this week, our special mini Triduum, is what part do we play in helping the world come to be together more as one family? And what is it that we need to be able to do to eradicate hatred, violence, revenge in the world? And if we're looking for an answer, we don't have to go very far. We've just heard a very powerful teaching from Jesus himself. You know, one of the things that we learned when we were in high school, you know, different elements of what marks grammar and what marks elements of speech was a hyperbole, you know, kind of an exaggeration. And in a certain sense, we hear Jesus doing that today and said, you know what, take a look for a moment about what you're doing. You're always looking for the speck that's in somebody else's eye. You know, you're looking to criticize other people or point the finger at them, to blame people for when something doesn't go wrong. But before you do that, and this is where the hyperbole comes in, Jesus says what's so true, and you and I have to admit it, we got to remove the plank in our eyes. The plank that makes us blind, that makes us blind to goodness, that makes us blind to opportunities where we can, in fact, join hands and hearts together to really help the world come to be more of what God created it to be in the very first place. And so today it is important for us to take some time to pray for all of those people who died on 9/11. And yes, it's important for us to think about the people who perpetrated that violence. But it's even more important for us to take a look at the root causes of terror and violence that exist in our own hearts. And think about this for a moment. For this first couple of weeks after 9/11, we all found a comfort in coming closer to the Lord. And once those weeks bore away, we moved away from it all and went back to our usual business of how we live. But I think the reality of what we've got to be able to take a look at is how sometimes, we place universal blame over everybody. We place universal blame on an entire ethnic group of people based on the ones who mounted violence in the United States that day. Sometimes we hear today people placing blame on all police officers because of the horrific actions of just a few. And isn't it true that we have a tendency in our own lives to notice the faults in other people that are more prominent in our own lives? And rather than looking to root out of our hearts what needs to be rooted out, we focus our attention on continuing violence by the way in which we don't look at other people the way that God looks at us. Father Tom challenged us to do that on Wednesday. And it seems to me that in addition to praying for those who were in fact the victims of 9/11, we need to take a look at what victimized them. And it is the fact that there are planks in our eyes that need to be removed by the power of God's grace. Because once those planks are removed, then in fact we have the opportunity to become more like Jesus. To be able to look at every person whom we meet through the eyes of God the Father, God the Creator himself. And that's what takes us back to the big Triduum of every year. That what happened on that Holy Thursday, what happened on Good Friday, and what happened at that great Easter feast was the opportunity that we can, in fact, remove the planks from our eyes and become the kind of people that God created us to be in the first place. And we can be this kind of people if we are willing, and the challenge, to in fact embrace what it means to be a people who receive the mercy of Jesus from the cross, that we can in fact look at each other the way he looks at us from the cross and beyond.